everybody. Welcome to the Fire It Up with CJ show. Today we are going to be talking about energy, and we're talking to Lee Harris, who I'm going to say you have a master's in energy. Is that fair to say? I, I
I
know
would
you
say
take an
I'm a
energy mastery
student.
class, so why not have a master's or maybe a doctorate in energy?
Student and teacher are all the same, so yes, let's say that. Go for it. Why not?
He has his PhD in energy. Okay, so I have to tell you, I just flew. I woke up at. I went to sleep at 12:30 East Coast time, and I got up at 3:30 East Coast time. So I'm up, and then I really wanted to listen to the two MP3s that are part of your program. I think they're part of your monthly membership program on the portal, and so I listened to "Awakening the Heart" uh, 2 or 3 days ago when I was walking around New York City, and that was the perfect thing to do in New York City
Yeah,
because my
right.
heart needed to be awakened. Something needed to have happen. And then I listened to an MP3 that you did, something chaos. I can't remember. Living in chaos,
Mastering Chaos, I think that one's called.
mastering chaos. Yes,
Mhm.
and I thought, oh, I didn't have enough time to listen to it, so I was listening on the plane this morning. And I kept on, and granted, I was sleepy because I didn't have that much sleep, but I kept on falling asleep. I think I've listened to that MP3 maybe 3 times, and I kept on falling asleep. And I thought, this is so unusual. I wonder if somehow I need to be hypnotized with this information and hear it over and over and over again. And by the fourth time, like I am going to like glue my eyes open, and I'm going to type the questions up so I will not fall asleep. And it ended up being kind of the perfect MP3 because I think it's so perfect for the time that we're in right now societally. So I was hoping you can riff off of the stuff that you have in there because I think not I think it's what it's kind of as above as below, as
Mhm.
within as without. The It seems like what's happening societally is happening to us individually, and there's a lot of chaos being created in the world right now. And so I thought that that would be a perfect thing to, there's fires in Sonoma, fires,
Mhm.
earthquakes, hurricanes, people kneeling or not kneeling, people calling each other names. I mean, it's just the most chaotic time. And so I figure we would talk about that. How about that, since it's related to
Yeah,
that MP3?
yeah. So that MP3 you speak about Mastering Chaos, I'm pretty sure, because that's a couple of years ago now, but I'm pretty
Hmm.
sure that's all channeled.
Yes.
And when I channel, which I do as part of my work, I often feel like I'm going to fall asleep right before doing it. And it's quite common with channeled information or material to have that kind of drift in, drift out experience.
Interesting.
Um, because it's kind of like a meditation, and your linear mind is not supposed to be tracking it in the way that we are so linear mind trained.
Hmm.
Even though the channel is giving words, you'll notice with the syntax, it's not traditional linear grammar or sentence
Hmm.
structure often. So that
Yeah, and
kind of
it's
makes
yeah, it's not
sense.
even told in a linear way because I noticed that you would talk about one topic. Not you, the
Hmm.
channeled Aziz is the person you're channel. What who is
Yes,
Aziz that you're channeling? Who is
totally.
that?
So in my early 20s, I first heard my guides, and when I asked, when I got over the whole, am I schizophrenic? Am I making this up? All that stuff that you go through. And I asked, can you give me a name for yourself? They said, well, we don't have names, but we know that you like names and need names. So we're a collective, but you could call me Zachary. And Zachary was the spokesperson at the time. And
Oh
then
wow,
over the years, I met a few of the others who differentiated, and they all had names beginning with a Z. So,
wow, how
funnily enough,
fascinating.
we call them the Z's, and they
Oh,
used to be called the
disease.
three Z's. So maybe that's why you're falling asleep, CJ. Um, but that now they don't really differentiate anymore. It's just gotten back to one collective voice because there was a time when the two females came forward,
Hmm.
and they said, we're not strictly male and female in the way that it's so divided on your planet, but Then there came a point when they said, we're just going to homogenize again, which is what your planet now needs to do around male and female. And that was something that we were doing for a period of time because it
Mhm.
was useful to illustrate a point.
Mhm.
So I met them 20 years ago,
Mhm.
and now they're part of my work. And as things have got increasingly chaotic, it's been fascinating to see. I remember them prophesizing 10 years ago. Um, Things will be very emotional a decade or so from now on your
Well,
planet,
they're
and
right.
people will be really in touch with their emotions. And as can often be the case with guided or higher self information, the way that we interpret it that day isn't necessarily how we're going to experience it when we're living in it. And I remember thinking, oh, that's great. You know, as
Mhm.
somebody who was who,
Emotional
you know,
intelligence, yay!
exactly. But sadly, no, that's not the case. It's just a hell of a lot of emotion with varying levels of comprehension, cohesion, emotional awareness, being thrown around. The irony is, for me, as uncomfortable as I can be as a human being, seeing and being emotionally impacted by all this stuff that's going on and living through it, and as much as it forces me out of my comfort zone, the same as everybody else, I always, whenever I go back to them and talk to them about this time, there is this feeling of we can't go forward without going through what we're going through right now. And I,
Mm.
I look at what's just kicked up in the last few days with the Weinstein scandal, Harvey
Mhm.
Weinstein, and
Mhm.
so many reports of actresses being sexually abused by him.
Mhm.
And to me, whenever there is some kind of celebrity focus or you know, public person focus in that way, it just ripples across us as a society
Mhm.
for us all to feel what we feel about that or
Right.
play out our own experiences. So wherever you look at the moment, the rise of imbalance for examination is uncomfortable and ugly and confrontational, and yet from it is coming this kind of enormous internal change for all of us. So one of the things that I just spoke about in my energy update for this month,
Mhm.
every month I get on camera and just talk about,
Mhm.
what's going on, where are we going next, and how do we deal with all of this stuff.
Yeah, for folks who are interested, you can find it on YouTube, which I heard
Yeah,
this is it seemed like that's why I listened to that update and this one seemed to play right into it. So I thought
right,
it's kind of a perfect
right,
timing
yeah.
for what people
Perfect.
need to
I,
hear.
I was in New York a week ago and I came back and have been like had this raging cold for like a week that's
Oh
just
no.
beginning to lift. So I smiled when you said I was just in New York and needed to listen to the Heart one when I was there because it's one of my favorite places and it's intense and it's like an electric current that will kind of kick your butt or will elevate you depending on wherever you are and wherever you
Yes.
need to go.
Yes.
Um, so anyway, the energy update spoke about the identity crisis that's kind of just playing out right now across the globe.
Mhm.
We had beliefs and we had ways of being based on the old identity of the world that we've kind of lived through for the last 30 years or so. And suddenly all of that's being detonated from inside. And, it kind of brings up so many things. It can catalyze old trauma that needs to be healed as you're
Mm.
confronted with a Weinstein story that takes you back to your past at the age of 22 when you as a woman were mistreated by somebody.
Right.
But it can also, take us through those stages of trauma, grief, numbness, sadness, and then ultimately into action. And I
Mhm.
just did a retreat at Omega last weekend, and
Mhm.
there were a few channeled messages throughout the weekend.
Mhm.
And one of the ones that was coming through loud and clear was um, if you aren't creating and acting yet, get ready because the period of shock, trauma, disbelief, grief is moving out. And the period of activism and fire and people deciding, okay, I'm gonna do something active that will bring change to this situation is
Mhm.
really on the rise and will continue to rise over the next 1 or 2 years.
It's
And
funny
I,
because
I
yeah.
feel see that going on everywhere right now.
Well, I last night my last show on Broadway was watching Michael Moore, and
Oh,
he who is an activist from Flint, Michigan,
yeah,
and
I love
yeah, and he was fantastic, and he shared story after story of how he and you know and he's such a great storyteller, so who knows what the truth is, but the way he describes it is that he's done very little and had made so much change on the societal front, like from the time that he got laws changed in Michigan for discriminatory practices. He wrote a speech. All he did is he wrote a short speech on the Elks Club and how on their application form they had some questions that he thought were discriminatory against blacks. And so he was in a speech contest sponsored by the Elks Club, and they wanted him to talk about Abraham Lincoln. So he wrote a speech. How ironic the Elks Club was sponsoring this thing about Abraham Lincoln when they had these applications that had discriminatory practices, and as a result, got the whole all these the Elks clubs and all those other types of clubs were no longer able to discriminate against people against a membership because it was one of those weird kind of remnants that was still there, and they lost their tax exempt. Like all this stuff happened as a result of like some 14-year-old boy writing a speech. And so he talked about story after story of, really small actions. Like I guess he won, he was the head of the school. What is I can't remember the in school the in his in the state or in his county or something. He was able to run for school board, and he was elected a member at age 18. And so he talks about how he got 20 signatures. That's all he needed to do, and the adults were upset, so they all. They didn't want this 18-year-old kid to be head of the school board or part of the school board, so they all ran, and then they had 7 adults versus this kid. They split the vote, and he ended up winning. And so he
Mm,
just told story after story of in his and these could be exaggerated, and I don't know how much these things are aligned to the exact truth, but small things that we could be doing that would make a
yeah,
huge difference, and you just have to do them, and it doesn't have to be a
yeah,
huge thing. Just go out
yeah.
and do them. So you're telling me that the reason why there's so much chaos in the world when through all your channeled messages, whether it was this one in the MP3 or the one that you've been getting recently or an Omega,
hmm
um, what's causing, like, why is there so much chaos? And it seems like what people are doing are they're blaming it on, it's because of Trump. It's because of, uh, uh, it's because of Andrew Merkel. Like they're just pointing fingers at everyone, trying to say it's everyone else's fault, and it's not their fault, but everyone else is to blame for this situation. So why is there so much chaos? Like from your guide's perspective.
Well, I don't think I've ever heard anything from them that I haven't then seen in other prophecies or material, but just the period of history that we are in is revising everything that we have known before and chucking out everything that doesn't work. And I mean, I just look at the environment like anybody on the planet right now. I'm 41 years old, so I don't feel I have or need to know the bigger answer
Mm-hmm.
as to why, but I definitely feel like I'm in the middle of the tide that's being pulled in a new direction.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, environment is a big issue.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing that I've questioned for a long time is just our planetary and human and other species survival on this
Mm-hmm.
planet with the way that things are going.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel, for me personally, seeing what's going on around us, just the environment to me is a metaphor for all of the other things that we can no longer ignore and
Mm-hmm.
don't really have the time to spend decades arguing about or disagreeing about. And the more we spend that time arguing or disagreeing with each other and not really paying attention to what's right in front of our eyes, the more we jeopardize our lifespan here, and not just our lifespan, but the lives of all life on Earth
Mm-hmm.
or sentient life in that way. So I don't know the answer, CJ, and
Could
I
you channel or have you channeled to find out specifically about the environment, and if the environment had a voice, what it would want us to know?
that we aren't promised life here, and that's often a human arrogance or assumption because we tend to not look beyond ourselves, and we're in an era of time where that is how we have been able to live for a long time, and that time now has to stop.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of what we're hitting, because
Right.
there's so many people wanting to continue to develop technology and human life and what serves human life and AI and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
But the truth is that the earth is bigger than all of us. And without that life form, if we want to stay on this planet, we're going to be in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, when I look at what's going on environmentally, it feels like all of these things point back to some of the ills of our society are now coming up: abuse of power, um, capitalism, and a certain amount of people having wealth and comfort and stability while everybody else gets ignored. And in the most extreme cases, we have whole areas of the world that can't function or survive in a time when we have the technology and the ability to level the playing field for everybody. But the question is, will we, and how willing are we to do that? So for me, that's the time that we're in. But it's a very personal shift that I tend to work with people on rather than looking at it from a global or a political
Right.
perspective, because that's not really my wheelhouse.
Right.
My wheelhouse is more working with people. Okay, how are these universal changes affecting your personal transformation? And how is your personal transformation going to be part of the greater solution if you can take off the part of you that's numb because of grief, and if you can get through the part of you that's challenged because you've never known how to speak up before because you've never had to, but now we're in a time where the voice of the bully is louder than ever in societal positions of power and influence. And now the voice of the people is having to learn that uncomfortable moment where you have to stand up and say, no, this isn't okay. Nobody
Mm-hmm.
likes a bully in the room, but until somebody challenges a bully in the room, the bully is going to be the dominating force. And that's the one thing that the guides will often say: it only takes a few people with destructive intent or effect to change the vibration of a room of 100 great people.
Mm-hmm.
So there is this fire that's required in, let's say, a lot of the people I've met along the years of working on the spiritual journey. There's a desire for peace, there's a high sensitivity, and there is a desire for things to be harmonious. Working with a lot of those people over the last few years, the call to arms for those people is: it's important for you to maintain your own balance, yes, but it's also going to be important for all of us to, whether it's get on the streets for a rally, whether it's go and
Mm.
help in your local area, that also has to start happening. That's this new phase that we're all in.
Mm.
So
I see.
I'm
So
often
it's
working with that identity crisis with
I
people.
see. Okay. So when you talk about, because when you're, and I think because it's like as within, as without, or whatever that phrase is, right? So we are so when I actually hear about the work that you're doing with people individually, I just assume it's also societally, because the same thing that's happening in society is happening and being mirrored in our own individual lives. And
Mm.
so that's what I look at too, because when you said, oh, we're going through an identity crisis, I thought, yeah, the United States and Germany and England, we're all going through, and North Korea, we're going through an identity crisis, right? Like how we identified ourselves, what we stand for, what we mean, it's all changing. And so now we're in this great unknown, which creates chaos. And so that's happening at a global level, and I think happening at an individual level and I don't even know, and in some ways to me it feels more like it's happening on the outside and forcing us on the inside to kind of reconcile who we are amidst all this change. That's so I think of them as one and the same, but I understand what you're saying, that you're not here to talk about world politics. But I think in terms of world transformation, it's kind of the same as individual
Yeah.
transformation, don't you think?
Yeah, I love the people who I know who are brilliant at talking about world politics, and
Right.
that's not my area.
Yeah.
Even though I like having the conversations
Yeah.
personally
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
within groups. It's interesting, one of the things, I've worked with people for 14 years, and whether it's doing workshops around the world or working one-on-one with people, there are some key truths that I've learned, and that show up with everybody, whether it's working with a CEO who's a billionaire, or somebody who is a house husband, or a stay-at-home dad to look after the kids while his
Mhm.
wife goes out to, to really, whatever the person's identity, what I keep seeing time and time again is that we're designed to keep uncovering our purpose as we go through life. And
Mm-hmm.
most people, very few people I've ever met are truly supposed to just follow one track through their life. And
Mm-hmm.
yet we get hit constantly by the programming that all of us have adopted, usually because of safety, conformity, and those two things are great things. Sometimes when we feel safe, we are able to perform to our best for our community. So I don't always see safety and conformity as problems in and of themselves, but they become that when they're a straitjacket. So if your parents never believed that you could be an entrepreneur because they've never been an entrepreneur and run their own business, their fear for your safety, if that overly influences you and you stop yourself stepping into, no, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna run
Right.
my own business,
Right.
then you're caught in safety rather than supported by the safety that made you work in corporate for 10 years or 20 years to
Right.
learn what you needed to learn so you could then transfer it somewhere else. Um, so the thing that's always a truth for me, and I hear this from these guys when I channel them, that we constantly bring ourselves back to what we need next if we're open, meaning you can't make a wrong choice. I think in the old world of self growth and spirituality, there is this idea of resistance and, I went down the wrong path, I went down a
Mm-hmm.
dark path. And all of that's just the mind continuing to analyze or regret or
Mm-hmm.
have shame or guilt,
Mm-hmm.
which
Mm-hmm.
is just a human disease. If you are willing to keep unfolding why you're here and keep going, why am I here? I'm a bit bored. I love my family. I love, my friends. I feel grateful that I have enough things in my life to support me. But I'm actually bored.
Mm-hmm.
Do you sit with that boredom for 2 years, or do you start to just nudge at it and get curious about it and go,
Mm-hmm.
okay, I don't know what it is, but I'm going to try some new things. I'm going to actively create some changes in my life, knowing that if I actively change the circumstances of my life, a new me is going to show up.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing that I've seen that's consistently true is that people's lives, unless they are borderline psychological problems and they tip from a dramatic awakening into, kind of losing the plot a little bit, which you see sometimes, but with a
Mm-hmm.
very small percentage of
Mm-hmm.
people,
Mm-hmm.
their lives and the lives of the people around them get better and freer and more alive.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, if we can keep coming back to who we are on the planet and why we're here and recognizing that's just going to keep changing, and we let it change and we let go of the fear of losing our old identity to recognize that our identity is supposed to morph, and that's beyond aging, because aging will do that for us on some level
Right.
anyway, but it's beyond that. Then people get really benevolent. That's the thing that I keep seeing. If people
Which
are
people get benevolent? The people who are
okay,
changing or the people who
the
are relating
people
to the people who are changing?
so the people who are perhaps selfish enough to change their own path,
Mm-hmm.
because selfishness is a word that can sometimes be put upon you. So, for example, your parents,
Mm-hmm.
we don't want you to be a business person. We're
Mm-hmm.
worried about you. We have all these fears. Why don't
Right.
you stay in that job?
Right.
If you are selfish enough and it takes selfishness when you're kind of caught up with the needs, the
Mm-hmm.
desires, the influences of others to go, no, I'm going to have a conversation with you. I'm sorry. I know you don't want me to do this, but I need to do this.
Mm-hmm.
They're still not happy, but you do it anyway.
Mm-hmm.
You will walk out into the field by yourself without the support that you might prefer or that might
Right.
be more comfortable,
Right.
and show them that you're going to survive and you're going to thrive. And then that goes into them. They may never have the boldness to do it themselves, but they may in future years go, oh, wow, because we saw CJ do that, we just feel a bit more like, oh, she has paved the way. And my point would be, you would become more benevolent. So anybody who keeps opening to their purpose, generosity is the byproduct. And that doesn't mean every single day you're out there, flinging cakes at people or, constantly volunteering every day, because you'll have
Right.
days where you're tired and you need
Right.
to conserve your energy.
Right.
But that ultimately, the more you get connected to your purpose, you can't get connected to your purpose on this planet without getting more connected to people. I would argue, even if you're an introvert,
Hmm.
even if you're an
Interesting.
introvert who's at home making things that are going out into the world that are affecting people or having a positive effect on people, or you just prefer being with animals and you're
Right.
tending to those animals, even if you're an introvert, if you really focus on why am I here? Yes, I'm here to love people. Yes, I'm here to have these relationships. And there's a whole healing that can happen for me in those relationships and a lot of fulfillment and
Mm-hmm.
sometimes challenges that help me grow.
Mm-hmm.
But what am I here to do?
Mm-hmm.
And I think sometimes because of the way our society has trained, so many of us, particularly this last 30, 40 years, the achievement focus, the status focus, the getting certain things and then you'll be happy, which thankfully so many of those voices who have got those millions of dollars or status kind of report back, you know what? This didn't fill me up in the
Mm-hmm.
way that having a sense of purpose about life does.
Mm-hmm.
So my point is that this is a time when more of us are getting in touch with what's our purpose than ever before, particularly people who feel like they've kind of been driving their heels the last 5, 10 years. But
Mm-hmm.
it's usually an uncomfortable dark night of the soul that can precede that,
Mm-hmm.
either where you're nervous to do things, so you wait for a while, or there are things in your life that are falling apart in order
Mm-hmm.
to show you, okay, it's time to move and leave this state that I've said I
Mm-hmm.
want to move state for 3 years, but I've not done anything about it. And suddenly my friend relationships are changing, and oh wow, I've got redundancy at my job. Maybe this is the time that
Mm-hmm.
I'm being shown it's time to go and look for something else and
Mm-hmm.
become something else. So that kind of
Mm-hmm.
weaves back to the whole identity crisis. But
Mm-hmm.
for me, the benevolence part is I've never seen anybody get more connected to their purpose and less kind, benevolent, or generous to other people.
Yeah, I
Because
think that's
somebody
probably
who's
true. Yeah.
fixing,
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, I guess I've spent my whole life doing that, and just following. I actually one time I do channeling myself, and it just came out of nowhere. I was doing this work, and I was saying, well, one should blah blah blah, and someone said, why do you always say one? I think you're channeling, and I said, what's that? But for a long time, I've been kind of doing, I don't know, channeling. Probably not at the same. I don't do it as often or probably as religiously as you do, but I do it every now and then. And the one thing that kind of depressed me, but I think is true for probably everyone, is I said, well, what is my purpose? And what I heard was that your purpose is going to shift day to day. Like it's going to shift, that you're going to have to be willing to do this and that. And then, like, it's not going to be a linear path. You'll be doing this and then 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 this. We'll go through, kind of random path that you won't really understand how all the pieces knit together until the end, or maybe you never will understand how the pieces. And it was almost as if what I heard was you're kind of an emergency worker, like a ER person that
Mhm.
helps where when help is needed, and that's really your only purpose, to be there, listen, hear the sirens, go to the sirens, listen, respond, go to the next siren, listen, respond. And so I don't know. I think for some people, maybe that is, like, for me at least, I hated hearing that because I've led my life in a linear way up until that point. But there was something like, okay, I guess just that's the way it is. That it could be for some people that their purpose is not linear or straight line, but in a lot of ways like a mosaic or a spider web, or probably something less less linear than that.
I love it. It's funny because the word that keeps hitting me about you, kind
Mm-hmm.
of what your essence is transformer.
Ah.
And so you're a transformer for others, meaning you in a room is going to help midwife transformation for people or birth transformation for people. But
Mm.
equally, in order to be really good at that and learn all about that and have your own joy around it, you're going to keep transforming
Yeah.
as well. So it makes total sense. And I love what you said about the linear the kind of disappointing linear arrival, because I know many people who've had that. I've had that myself, where you get to a point where you're like, oh wow, these are the things that I was hoping I would experience for so
Right.
many years, and it's kind of like a big now what. And
Yeah.
to me, the gift of that now what was then I started to shed so many patterns of behavior that had
Mm.
got me to that point that I needed, but that were no longer going to be welcome or
Right.
convenient in the next part of this journey.
Yeah.
So I think I think what you also hit on that I hear a lot. I often joke that I'm like my workshops or my work is kind of one aspect of it can be like rehab for spiritual people. It's kind of, I mean, it's true, like rehab for light workers,
Uh-huh.
because I've done that path myself and I've had that, god awful experience where you don't know if you want to live anymore and
Mm.
you really consider it. You're like,
Oh.
wow, this is how
Oh.
dark it can get. And I see a lot of people get stuck after that point and unable to come back from that
Mm.
trauma,
Mm.
or things that happened for them in early life pulled them out of the body so fast that things like spirituality, visions, channeling, meditation, they're all safe. But anything to do with the body and real conflict, or how do I figure this out with this person without being overly sensitive, or
Mm.
that can be like a place that people won't re-enter the body. And I've had those times in my own life where I too didn't want to re-enter the body. So
Mm.
I have a lot of empathy for it and a lot of understanding of it, but I realize that, I'm quite irreverent about certain things, but not necessarily because I feel hugely irreverent about it, but because I mean, CJ, you work with people, so you know what it's like.
Mm-hmm.
When you're working with a person or when you're facilitating a group, you really are a vessel.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not, yeah, maybe little bits of your own human personality will come in here and there. Um, there are definitely aspects of me that I call on to do that work, but
Mm-hmm.
ultimately I'm in service to what's needed in front of me. And
Mm-hmm.
if you're really listening to the person or the group, it's not about the agenda that you went in with,
Right.
or, that's why I never prepare workshops. I just go in and
Oh, so you
we
never
see.
prepare. You have no idea what's going to happen. Oh,
No,
wow.
I
I'm
have like
envious of you.
it's taken me a long time to get used to that, and it's still very balls to the wall. Like, I'm usually about an hour before the workshop. I feel very uneasy, and I often wish I was. My partner Stephen is brilliant at planning and
Uh-huh.
structuring, so of course
Mm-hmm.
we're like, perfect
Yeah.
for each other. And I often have envy of the people who have their plan and their structure because I think, do they go through this right before? But that I've
Oh, they
also
do
got
that
used to
same
that.
thing. I have a plan, and I plan things
Oh,
down to the exact questions that I'm going to ask and which order. I know the timing from like 8 to 8:30. I'm going to talk about this. From 8:30 to 8:35, I have it planned down to, and then I get there and I change a whole thing. Like I
good,
feel into the
good.
room.
Yeah,
So it's kind of, I
yeah.
think it's you do
Perfect.
you
Yeah,
do whatever your go-to place. So your partner Steven maybe, put a
yeah,
plan, and then but then if you're really doing the thing that you're talking about, which is you're holding a space, you have to be okay with throwing everything that you have written on the page away. And then usually my clients don't like if, because they're corporate clients or doing strategic planning. So if I'm like, let's just throw away and talk about how you appreciate each other, like they probably are like, let's not pay you. Because I asked you to come up with a mission statement for my team. So there's kind of I have to do a little bit of a dance
Uh,
between those two. Um, so I wanted to go back to the light worker because you talk a lot about light worker and light workers,
mhm,
and I'm not sure
mhm.
exactly if I know what the term is. I know that I
Right.
did a meditation once, and I just kept on hearing you're supposed to be the lighthouse, lighthouse, lighthouse,
Mm,
lighthouse. So I
mhm.
don't know if that means I'm a light worker. What is a light worker?
Very good question. I'll give you my perspective of
Okay.
it. So from my perspective, light workers are people who bring the light, and that could be the kind of person who walks into a room who it has such a lovely aura
Mm-hmm.
that if you sit and speak to her or him, you feel calmer and there's an energy that they're bringing. Or a light worker is the ER nurse who is just tirelessly bringing acts of love and care through what she's doing for you.
Mm-hmm.
So light workers tend to be people who are
I'm neither of
focused on.
those two. Is there another type?
No, then you're definitely not one, CJ. Sorry. Um,
Okay, thank you, because I don't make people calm.
no, but you're more of a catalyst, and light workers are catalysts too.
Okay.
Meaning, Well, it's funny, when I gave that example earlier about you and your parents and you going off to be an entrepreneur and
Yeah,
making them nervous, that's the kind of quality you have. You have
I
the
see.
light worker leadership quality, which means you are more comfortable than many light workers would be in being the kind of the rebel or the leader in the room as everybody else freaks out at what you're suggesting, but you have enough grit and grace and divine trust of yourself that you will lead everybody there, even as they're like screaming, crying, protesting. But then over time,
So
people
you've
kind of
heard
go,
about my workshops.
I haven't. This is my first time meeting you, but
Yeah, no, people have screamed at me. Sometimes they're crying. Sometimes they're stressed out. So
it's
yeah.
good though because I feel like you're a truth teller, and I feel like you're a truth teller about shadow, and
Yeah.
so therefore probably a lot of shadows get hurled back at you from the
Oh,
people who are
no
aware of
kidding.
them.
So is this
Don't
so?
they?
So I'm a special kind of light worker that gets crap thrown at her. How did I end up
Oh.
being that one? Can I be the other two? They sound much calmer and
Well,
nicer.
you could stop paying attention to the crap that's thrown at you. One of the best things I ever did was I read some Amazon reviews of one
Hmm.
of Eckhart Tolle's books. And, what's wrong with Eckhart Tolle? I mean, as far as I can see, nothing. Even if he's
Right.
not your kind of writer or
Oh, he's
meditation teacher, there's
lovely.
nothing to be offended by with
Yes.
Eckhart. And oh my God, there were some unbelievably scathing reviews calling him evil incarnate.
Oh my goodness.
And of course, there were lots of great ones. This was
Right.
about 5 or 6 years ago, and I used it as
Mm.
an example in a workshop as to, don't worry about the haters. They might affect you sometimes because they trigger a wound. And that's true for all of us. And that's useful. Like if
Mhm.
you read something and you're like, oh, wow, that person thinks that of me and it hurts, or you get
Mhm.
defensive,
Mhm.
good to get curious. But,
Mhm.
generally, other people's opinions are other people's opinions. And I think, if nothing else, this era that we're in politically in America right now is a really good opportunity for everyone to practice not reacting when something is said that they don't agree with or are upset about or think is ludicrous, because I think that's going around.
Okay, so I have a question for you. So my girlfriend's always, you need to protect your energy, and she has all these stones scattered all over the place, and she talks about bubbles and like all this stuff. I mean, what? And I'm very sensitive to energy. I can, like, I'll do, I knew that only because I was doing a yoga class, and we're all connecting our heads and our arms, and I actually felt nauseous afterwards. And I was like, oh my
Mm.
God, I will never connect arms and heads in this way ever again. I almost threw up. It was so awful because I'm so sensitive to energy, and if someone having those kind of group combined energy when you're not leading, but you're just in the group, felt awful. So how does one protect themselves, whether it's Thanksgiving, which is coming up, Thanksgiving dinner, or cocktail parties? I mean, now it happens to anything. You really don't know when you're talking to someone. Where in Seattle, it's pretty safe to assume that they're a
Right.
Democrat or liberal. But I was just on the East Coast, and I was talking to my cousins, and I was not sure like what and you don't want to offend, but at the same time, you want to protect yourself. How do you protect yourself in the time where there is a lot of chaos and people are going through their shadow sides?
Well, it's interesting. I've always been a naturally cautious person at first. So
Hmm.
people who meet me in my work think I'm more extrovert than I am
Hmm.
because, I have to draw on the extrovert for that.
Right.
But actually, my default when I first meet somebody is more introverted and a bit
Hmm.
more, I like to check things out,
Hmm.
and I like to see what I'm walking into. And I got given that feedback by like teachers at university. They said, "Oh,
Mm.
we were a bit worried about you." So I learned that through other people's
Mm.
observations. I didn't
Mm.
know that innately. With you, I would say a little bit more of that would be good because you have a strong fire energy.
Hmm.
And so, and you also have a great gift of presence, meaning
Hmm.
you're really willing to be present with people, which is a beautiful quality to have
Hmm.
if you are unwoundable.
Mm.
If you are unwoundable to somebody's jab or jibe, or you know how to deflect or defend it,
Hmm.
um, I would say that the aspect of you that's a really good, strong warrior, and I can feel that aspect in you brilliantly, you need to work on the shield a bit more than the sword.
Mm. Mm. That's
Because
interesting.
my sense is that it's just an intuition that you perhaps ignore the first one or two red flags, and your mind tells you to have good faith and give them a
I
chance
do.
and
Yeah.
give them an opportunity.
Right.
And then the third time, when they, put a fork in your arm and it hurts, you can then fire up and protect yourself. But what I would say to you is just it's a subtle thing because you're very good at scrutinizing and seeing things clearly when you focus there. But I feel like with people, you tend to look at them the third time rather than the first or
That's
second
true. I
when
give
that
people a
is
chance. I give
really
them three chances. That's actually my rule of thumb. I give you three chances,
uh,
and if you mess me up, then you're out. Like I will take
uh,
this. I will take the sword and poke you back. That doesn't
so
sound nice, but
so
that really
those
is what I
first
do.
in those first two chances, rather than just sitting back and leaving your chest exposed, just gently nudge them with the shield on the second one. So, for
Okay, so
example,
how does one energetically nudge someone with the
okay,
shield?
well, let's play this out. It's Thanksgiving, so you just brought up liberal Democrat
Yeah.
versus Republican. So, let's say somebody makes a political statement
Right.
that you find offensive.
Right.
Would your default the first two times to kind of let it go, and then the third time to let them have it?
Yeah, I probably would try to deflect. Like they would say, "Oh, well, I just think Trump is great." Be like, "Anyways, do you want to pass a gravy?" Like I would try to deflect the whole
Yeah,
thing.
don't do that anymore.
Okay.
So definitely just now start because there's something in you that's reacting to that isn't your truth. And one of the things that I think is really important when we're in a room,
Mhm.
whatever vibration we're allowing happen in that room, we're allowing it to happen. And I see a lot of empathic, sensitive people stepping back from conflict or going, oh, there isn't room for me in this room. And the message I've been giving for several years is we all have to put ourselves in the room. And I've tried this. I've been the introvert who's like, oh, I don't really want to get involved in this conflict. So I'm just
Mhm.
going to back out. I'm
Right.
going to stay quiet. I'm going to leave in 20 minutes. I've also actively experimented the other way and gone, I don't love what's going on here. Why don't I try and bring myself to the room more?
Mhm.
Why don't I bring myself into the room? So for you, I would say on that first comment that someone's like, oh, I think Trump's great, you go, oh, I'm curious because I really don't. I'm curious. Why do you?
Mhm.
So before it escalates, whatever vibration has come into the room and I mean you're a brilliant interviewer, so
Mhm.
this should be easy for you. This is your wheelhouse. So I almost feel, and this is true for many of us at the moment, the thing that's a skill in our job that we don't always bring into our personal life and
Mhm.
vice versa now has to merge.
Mhm.
So for you, I would say bring out your shield, give someone a warning sign through revealing your hand when they play a hand that you don't necessarily agree with or like, because it's also tricky for them to come down from, if they've just been allowed to inflate the room with three or four really awful sentences, it's harder for them then to apologize, eat humble pie, than if on that first sentence or two, someone else in the room says, oh, I really don't agree with that. I know why I don't agree. I'm curious. Why do you? So there's a
Mhm.
dialogue that starts to
Mhm.
happen because if you're shut in a room with somebody, show up and engage with them and get curious about what's there. So for me, with you, what I would say is you have a lot of fire, and that's a great quality.
Mhm.
Obviously, I know you'll have to manage that because you can also get exhausted if you burn that
Mhm.
fire out.
Mhm.
But what I would say in your case, and this is true for anyone listening who identifies with what we've just gone through, to really trust your eyes, but use your eyes.
Mhm.
And when you're with somebody, if you notice, oh, wow, this man that I was having a really nice conversation with just said something that was really racist, and I don't think he realizes, but I'm going to remember that. And if that comes up again and it makes me uncomfortable, what could I say or communicate or ask? Sometimes it's as simple as going, sorry, did you just? I'm not sure I heard you right. Could you just repeat that last sentence? I'm
Right.
serious. This really,
Right.
this really is. It's a great way of not shaming or attacking or judging someone,
Right.
but to see if their consciousness. Now you're making them conscious that hang on, I just want to hear that thing that came out your mouth again. Could you just repeat that because I'm not sure I heard you right. You'd
Mhm.
be amazed how many times people do not repeat the same sentence. It's like
Oh, that's
something
interesting.
inside them knows because you're bringing your focus, your vision, your
Mhm.
heart, your
Mhm.
energy, And suddenly, when they've got more of your attention, there's a merge in the energy field, and they can't easily just slip the knife into that attention.
Hmm.
So they start to modify too. And I don't know about you, CJ, but for me, I've often learned to upgrade my thoughts, my ways of communicating on the job, thanks to other people doing things like that. You know, someone will say, "Hang on, what did you just say?" And even them saying it, I'm like, "Oh, wow,
Yeah,
yeah,
let me
I
think
think
about, I actually am the
that."
same way. I go, well, wait a
Yeah,
second, what did I say? Let me think about
exactly.
it. And
So
yeah, that's
people help
interesting.
me out with that all the time, and I
Yeah.
learn constantly when teaching too.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's the same for all of us in personal conversations.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we need to be afraid of each other because of differing opinions. I think fearing each other because of differing opinions is going to make us all separate and go to war.
So you don't so I was thinking that you're going to talk about energetic bubbles and all these other kinds of things. Are you a believer in that? What?
I said, I know, sorry. I am a believer in that to a point, but I don't feel, here's the thing. I've worked in the field I've worked in for a long time, and I see those tools, if used alone, be ineffective for people in this
Mm,
day and age. I see
mm,
those tools, if used with the perhaps harder to attain ability to successfully have a dialogue with someone where there's a disagreement
mm,
without raging conflict or without wounds being thrown. So for me, those things are great. Like I have a practice, it's here above my desk. Um, One of the sentences that the channel gave once was to say, I release any energies and emotions that are not mine. So,
mm.
for example, you come home from a party or you walk away from a conversation, you're like, oh, I feel really funky. I don't really know what just happened. I use this a lot. I'll do it multiple times a day if I'm in New York, for example. I'll just say, I release any energies and emotions that are not mine. I release any energies and emotions that are not mine. I
Mhm,
release any energies and emotions that are not mine. I do that 3 times. Even doing it then, things move in my body. I can feel it. I always
mhm,
feel it in my base between my hips most.
mm,
For other people, it might be more your heart or your
mhm,
mind. You
mhm,
can say it in silence if you're in an environment where you can't say it out loud, but it has an effect.
mm,
So I use those tools all of the time too. But for me, this time that we're in now is actually kind of the new learning for people who identify as light workers or spiritual, or it's really the action for me. And for me
mm.
too, it's the same. I'm going through the same learning of, okay, in this very different time, how do we speak to each other? Because shit's getting
Yeah, it's
real
going
kind of.
back to it's going back to the thing of a bully's in the room or someone said something that you don't necessarily agree with. The polite version would be like, "Oh, I better not say anything because it's not polite. We're having lunch for the first time and I just met this person or whatever." But instead, it's like, "Wait, excuse me, did I hear you correctly? Did you just say that, you think it's okay to murder people or whatever kind of crazy things that people are saying nowadays?" And just that saying like I'm holding you to task. Like I want to understand what you just said because it just does not resonate with me at all. That would be a different approach than I think most times people are. I mean, if there is one value to all these crazy tweets that come across is this kind of unabashed response responsing me. Maybe it could be a little bit curbed in, but I think that part of it is that he's like out there showing exactly what Trump is out there showing exactly what he's thinking, saying what he wants, and he's unabashed. I mean, I may not like it, but I know where he stands. Where he may not know where I stand. If I'm trying to I give him 3 chances before I go out and basically stab him, which seems actually worse, right? For someone to have not put up a shield and then stab you out of nowhere seems actually worse than someone, taking a little, X-Acto knife and slicing me in little dices all over
Mm-hmm.
the place. So, I mean, that is one virtue of, I think, speaking your truth. I think it can be done with a lot more kindness, I guess, is what I think is missing with a lot of the dialogue that I'm hearing lately. But
Yeah.
I think it's the probably what I'm hearing you say is the crossing the two between being kind but then also being firm is the trick.
Yes, I agree. And I think one of the things that that I used to definitely ascribe to. Like in my late teens, early 20s, I would read spiritual books, I would read self-help books, and I was totally of a mind, am I getting this right? Am I doing this right? We have that self-doubt just programmed into us. Um, at the moment, that one of the big things that kind of why I said, I'm often spirituality rehab or self-help rehab. One aspect of what I do is to help people come back to the human and the everyday life, and how does all of this stuff apply, or is it just what we read in a book or have in a
Right.
meditation?
So I want to go back to ask you about light workers. And so
Mhm.
you're saying that there's several different types of light workers. I may not be the typical type, but why is it important? What are light workers? What do they do? What's their purpose? Or is it depending on the type of light worker they are?
So firstly, light workers is a term that I had heard for many years and,
Mm-hmm.
and kind of was around, but it wasn't necessarily anything I identified with or well, it took me a while to figure out that light workers is a good name for people who identify with spirituality, consciousness, often healers, teachers, people in healing professions
Mm-hmm.
or helping professions are often light workers in that they are the kind of person who can generate a certain energy in a room.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I think this is a tricky distinction. That's why I chose the ER nurse as an example, because sometimes you think, okay, well, Oprah walks into a room and generates an energy,
Right.
but the ER nurse is generating an energy of solidity and healing in that ward. It might not be that she is giving you a warm hug every moment, but she is really caring for the well-being of everyone and the structure that keeps the well-being of
Mm-hmm.
everyone going. So
Mm-hmm.
so it's not a term that I feel particularly protective around, or that I'm the best person to describe, but
Mm-hmm.
it's interesting that it kept coming up in the channeling,
Mm.
and the channels
Mm.
would keep talking about it, and they describe people who have the ability to help move energy.
Mm.
And so often these people feel very unpurposeful or unaligned with being alive unless there's something that they are doing energetically that they enjoy. So, for example, you could say, the singer-songwriter Björk is a light worker
Mm.
because she's created this emotional music. She was a pioneer at a time. She
Mm-hmm.
she represented something that we'd not really seen, and she also was a pioneer for women in rock at a time where it was just beginning to come to
Mm-hmm.
everyone's awareness. Why on every top 100 rock star list are there only three women?
Mm-hmm.
Kind of that
Mm-hmm.
old paradigm crap. So light workers can be anything, but they're people who tend to be working on behalf of and for, or have a high value around people's well-being, peace on the planet. And it doesn't mean that light workers don't have shadows, because if we're in a human body, we'll have our blind spots, we'll have the areas that we're not so good at. But generally, a grid of people across the planet who are working on behalf of a new humanity, whether they're conscious of it or not. And that was the thing that the guides explained. They said sometimes this person won't have spiritual beliefs, but they are the person in their neighborhood who is bringing love to others in an unfiltered, unrestricted way, and then promoting more love on the street. So light
Mm.
workers stand, to use a cliche, stand for light and love. And it's important to remember that sometimes light and love shows up in a fierce form.
Mm. What does that mean?
Well, that might be you, CJ.
Yeah.
No, I see your light and love, and it's a lot softer than you think. And I think I told you this right before we came on this call this morning, knowing that we were going to do this
Mm-hmm.
afternoon, never having met you. I just typed your name in to see if I could look at the shows or anything, and
Mm-hmm.
I found your really moving, inspirational, beautiful TEDx talk,
Thank you.
and that
Yeah.
was full of light and love,
Yeah.
and I really loved your energy, and I was pleased because you never really know, this interview was set up for us by Noah,
Right.
so yeah, you never really know who you're going to be talking to, but I saw that and was like, oh, look at her on her purpose. And living your purpose does not mean you're always happy, always wealthy, or I think all that stuff that we've kind of been sold a bill of goods. Living your purpose, you're still a human being going through growth, going through
Oh,
challenge.
absolutely. I can attest to
So,
that. Um,
yeah.
so what do you mean out of fear? Living out of fear? What did you say? Loving out of fear? What do you?
Loving out of fear. I don't think I said
Oh,
that.
I thought you
No.
said that there's some people who send love and light sometimes out of fear.
Oh, fierce.
Oh,
Fierce. I said
fears.
sometimes like it's fierce.
I know. I was like, what does he see in me that I
I
don't
did.
see? I don't. I know I have some fear, but I'm giving love and light out of fear. Lord.
That was good that you asked me, because if you hadn't asked me two more sentences from now, you might have hit me with your sword if I'd have said something else. So this is good. See, this is good.
No, I was just
Yeah.
more curious. I'm like, what does that mean if I'm living love and light out of fear? I don't even know if that's possible.
Fierce,
That's so
fierce.
funny. Okay, got so doing it in a fierce kind of way, and so that's basically interesting because I've heard the word light worker.
Mhm.
Some people have said like, "Oh, you're a healer," and then each time they say that, I go apoplectic because I don't want to be a healer. But I'm beginning to. I don't know why because I don't feel like I'm supposed to go do hands-on healing with people. But I
Well,
guess they come into all different forms, right?
they come in all different forms, and I think one of the big illusions that stops any of us being anything, and I hear this all the time with people who think they want to do energy work or healing or teaching of some kind, they'll say that, and I hear this all the time, they go, well, I'm not fully healed myself. And I'm like, well, welcome to the human race. I've
Right.
met that's not the design. And you can be a brilliant healer while going through a very painful divorce that's changing
Mm-hmm.
your identity. That doesn't
Mm-hmm.
stop your ability to show up for your job. If anything, I would argue that makes you more than compassionate to the pain and the identity crisis that you go through in a divorce.
Mm-hmm.
So I think in your case, I think one of the misconceptions is that as a healer, that means you are constantly emanating at a frequency of 132 hertz. You float down your street, and whenever you meet the neighborhood dog, you always smile and pat its head.
Yeah.
No, you might be having a really tough day that day, so you're more introverted, or so I think in your case, what you speak to is the disease that we all have or have had of
Mm-hmm.
buying into what we think something should be or
Mm-hmm.
look like.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and for me, the best healers are, really clear about our eternal studenthood as a human being, until
Mm-hmm.
the day we die,
Mm-hmm.
eternal.
Yeah. I love it. All right, so tell me about you're coming to Portland. You're doing a
Mm.
2-day event on February, let's see, February 16th to 18th, and then you're going to be in Costa Rica at the end of the month. And then you have this monthly members club. Tell us all about what all these different things are.
Okay, so my big thing really is my passion, my work is helping people open to themselves. And
Mhm.
I don't mind whether I'm doing that through being a transformation guide or coach for them, which
Mhm.
is how I work as an energy intuitive. When
Mhm.
I've worked with people one-on-one or in the room, I will work with you to pull apart your issue or belief that
Mhm.
there's so much energy and potential
Right.
underneath.
Right.
So the portal is a monthly members club that we have, and every month we do a 90-minute live Q&A video broadcast.
Oh, cool.
And in that video broadcast, the first half or so, I answer questions from the energy intuitive grounded standpoint, and the second half, I channel the Z's, and they answer people's questions. So we
Oh,
normally get
interesting.
we get through a good 15 to 20 questions
Hmm.
taken from all that are submitted by the members that month. And we
Hmm.
always make sure that we get a nice spread of issues. So it's kind of, I mean, it really is like a healing call. By the
Hmm.
end of the call, the energy is shifted and everybody can go back into their lives with some of the group questions that are coming up for people being answered. And then you also receive a monthly MP3,
Mhm.
which you've just heard a couple of those. And Stephen, my partner, has just started doing a monthly qigong sequence on video in there
Oh,
that's usually
cool.
5-10 minutes long,
Yeah.
and he does it in response to my video energy updates that are my monthly free offering on YouTube and on Facebook. So whatever's going on energetically, he's going to come up with some qigong moves that will really support
Oh,
your
very
process
cool.
throughout the day. And
Okay.
then I think the final thing is we have a community forum. So it's a private place for people to share their
Mhm.
thoughts, their feelings, and what's going on. So it's
Mhm.
not social media. It's just a private forum. Um, Portland is a place I have a real special. I have a real love for Portland, and Energy Mastery is this retreat that we've been running for 3 years. It starts
Wow.
on a Friday evening and finishes on a Sunday afternoon, but we've never before done it in the way we're going to do it next year. We've
Mm-hmm.
always had it be for 33 people maximum.
Mm-hmm.
So the events would often sell out, and they were also a higher price point because people would get their hotel and their food included. What we're doing now is bringing that same model, that same format, to as many people as we can. So people can choose their own local accommodation, but it would still be a Friday, Saturday, Sunday experience
Mm-hmm.
that will feature channeling, sound healing, qigong work with Stephen, and facilitating people through what they want to bring into their life
Hmm.
and what they want to release. So at the beginning of an energy mastery, everybody writes down their intention. We put them in the intention bowl. Everybody writes down what they're ready to release. We put them in the release bowl. Those bowls then sit in the center of the room with a
Hmm.
load of crystals around them, and we cook the bowls for 3 days with a lot of humor and play, and
Mm-hmm.
a lot of love in the room. And everybody gets to know each other. So they're really special events. So yeah, Portland will be February the 16th to the 18th, and
Mm-hmm.
booking will be live probably in a few weeks' time.
So thank you so much. What a
Thank
pleasure
you.
talking to you. That was an
It was lovely.
unexpected pleasure.
Yeah, I love your fire and I love what you're doing in the world.
Oh,
So
thank
yeah,
you.
thank you.
Yeah.
It means so much to me that you're listening to the show. Would love your support in any way by giving me comments below, or to subscribe to the show, or share the show with friends. Thank you again for your support. Love and blessings.